up until very recently. Over the last 70 years, 80 years, since the end of World War II, we've papered over the law of the jungle with the falsehood, the fiction of international law. And that is what we hear much of today. The criticism of the United States, capture of Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro, and President Trump's words that we will run the country and that we will be in charge of the vast natural resources that exist within Venezuela. Venezuela, by the way, number one in the world when it comes to oil deposits and other critical minerals. Heavy crude, dirty crude, needed to be refined. One of the few places in the world capable of such refinery is the United States of America. Under Hugo Chavez and Nicolas Maduro, over the last 20 years, Venezuela has gone from one of the top producers in the world when it comes to oil and gas to absolutely crushed, much like the local economy, much like the local population, much like is the history of any communist regime, any experiment in extreme socialism, from the Soviet Union to Venezuela. But today, what you'll hear is not a celebration necessarily of conquest, but a question and the criticism that comes, I think, in three forms. One, this was an illegal operation. The basis of illegality for the United States military action in Venezuela seems to be the loose concept of international law. Today, the United Nations is conducting a security meeting to review what the United States has done in South America. And you can hear the cries and outrage from countries like Cuba and Colombia. But that is much less about really some type of moral international order and more fear of what the lion will do next in the law of the jungle. There is no such thing as international law. There is no such thing as international norms. As I've pointed out, for thousands of years, it has been the rule of the mighty. And make no mistake about it, the mighty is the United States of America. To the extent there is international law, it has been designed to keep smaller countries, upstart countries, from doing what was and is done by larger countries. That's just a point of fact, that hypocrisy, but it's not a point of moral certainty or moral superiority. The truth is, almost every civilization from the beginning of time has looked across its borders or across the world and said, we could use that. We could use that land. We could use that oil. We could use those resources. And we haven't really suggested there's some type of international law or common morality that prevents the better among us from living by the law of the jungle. It's a falsehood. It's a fiction. International law isn't real. It's never even pretended to be real when it comes to real-world action, only in words and only in debate halls, only in chambers at the United Nations. No, the real world exists by the law of the jungle. And I have no problem with that reality. You can't live by a fiction that no one else buys or lives by. You can't live in Neverland if no one else will join you in Neverland. And so I'm not here to hear about anything being illegal. Not by the standard of international law, and not even by the constitutional constraints of the executive power of the United States of America. Forewarning Congress, forewarning the Senate, a congressional declaration of war, while something that I think is or should be the standard course of business in the United States, has long since expired. When's the last time you saw Congress convene to actually declare war? Should or should not is beside the point. Is and is not is the reality of the world. The second criticism you hear is a bit of an isolationist streak that used to exist exclusively on the left, but today has become also the province of much of the right. There is a section of the right who sounds not unlike yesterday's left. Noam Chomsky, Gore Vidal, this fairy tale that in any international story, the bad guy, the villain, is always the powerful. Therefore, the bad guy, the villain, is always the United States of America. When President Trump came to power, he repositioned the United States into a more dovish foreign policy. The peace president, 8.5. What did he say? Did he say 9.5? Yesterday, coming home from sandhill crane hunting, I put on the press conference from President Donald Trump, and he gave himself credit for being the peace president. He said, I've settled 9.25 or 9.5 wars. He said Thailand, is it Thailand and Cambodia? He settled it once, it flared up, he settled again. So he's giving himself, a quarter or a half point on that one. It was really one of the most hilarious Trumpian moments of that press conference. 9.5 wars for the peace president, Donald Trump. But we on the right, or much of the right, has validated the criticism of the neocon conservative movement, and the left, because all the left really has to offer anymore is anti-Trumpism. Have you seen the way the left has responded to this latest, honestly, victory? Well, they're now championing Nicolas Maduro. We've gone from waving Ukrainian flags to waving Palestinian flags to waving Mexican flags to now we're waving Venezuelan flags. They're literally arguing for the release in some circles of Nicolas Maduro. And these are the people at higher levels of power, like Senator Chris Murphy, who, because his only worldview is in opposition of Donald Trump, because his only worldview is anti-Trumpism, can't reconcile with himself from 6 years ago when he criticized Donald Trump for not being involved in Venezuela.
So over the past decade, Nicolas Maduro, the brutal dictator of Venezuela, has presided over a stunning collapse of the Venezuelan economy that has caused nearly 8 million Venezuelans to leave that country, most of which destined for the United States. Part of the reason why we saw 10,000 people showing up at the border every day last year, a number that the United States just can't handle with current resources because of the meltdown of the Venezuelan economy. And so it's no surprise that in the election that was held this week, Maduro clearly lost. The briefings that I've received today suggest that Maduro not only lost, he probably lost in a landslide and is attempting as we speak to steal the election.
But today, Senator Chris Murphy criticizes Donald Trump for illegal actions to capture Nicolas Maduro, and he's not alone. He's also joined in his criticism today by Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer. But this was Chuck Schumer before on Venezuela and Maduro.
The president brags about his Venezuela policy? Give us a break. He hasn't brought an end to the Maduro regime. The Maduro regime is more powerful today and more entrenched today than it was when the president began.
Of course, you would think that would mean Senator Chuck Schumer celebrates today as Nicolas Maduro is in court in New York City. But no, he criticizes President Trump because the only guiding light for these politicians, for the left, for Democrats, is anti-Trumpism. It's not pro-Venezuela. It wasn't then. It's not now. It's not sincerity in the truth behind Epstein. It wasn't then and isn't now. It's only guided by anti-Trumpism.